The rain was pouring down hard, the windshield wipers barely keeping up. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white. I'd just finished a long shift at the diner and all I wanted was to get home and collapse into bed. The highway stretched out before me, dark and empty. I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of the car. The thick fog rolled in, making it hard to breathe. I felt so alone out here. Suddenly, I saw a figure on the side of the road, waving their arms. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should stop. It was the middle of nowhere and who knows what kind of weirdo could be out here. But I couldn't just leave them stranded in this storm. I pulled over and rolled down the window. A man was standing there, soaked to the bone. "Please, can you give me a ride?" he shouted over the rain. I took a deep breath and nodded, unlocking the door. He quickly hopped in, slamming it behind him. "Thanks so much, I really appreciate it," he said, shaking the water off his jacket. I just nodded, not trusting my voice. Something about him made me uneasy. His eyes were a little too wide, his smile a little too big. We drove in silence for a while, the only sound the howling wind and the tires on the wet pavement. I kept glancing over at him, trying to figure out what it was about him that bothered me so much. He just stared straight ahead, his hands folded in his lap. "So, where are you headed?" I finally asked, breaking the awkward silence. He turned to me, that unsettling grin spreading across his face again. "Oh, I'm just trying to get as far away from here as possible. This storm is no joke." I nodded again, not sure how to respond. The rain was coming down even harder now, the wipers working overtime. The fog was so thick I could barely see the road in front of me. "You know, they say this road is haunted," he said casually, like he was commenting on the weather. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "What do you mean, haunted?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He chuckled. "Oh, you know, strange things happen out here. Especially during storms like this. Weird noises in the woods, flickering lights, that kind of thing." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to say. I just wanted to get him to his destination and get home as fast as possible. Suddenly, a loud thump came from the back of the car, making me jump. "What the hell was that?" I cried, my voice shaking. He just laughed. "Probably just a tree branch or something. Nothing to worry about." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The storm was getting worse, the wind howling like a pack of wolves. The car shuddered as a gust hit us. "You know, I've been on this road a lot," he said, his voice low. "And I've seen some things. Strange things." I glanced over at him, my stomach twisting with fear. "What kind of things?" I asked, regretting the words as soon as they left my mouth. He leaned in closer, his eyes gleaming. "Things that aren't human," he whispered. "Things that lurk in the shadows, waiting for their next victim." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I wanted to tell him to shut up, to stop scaring me. But something about the way he said it, the way his eyes bore into mine, made the words catch in my throat. We drove on in silence for a while, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking back there. But all I saw was the endless black of the woods, the rain streaking down the glass. Suddenly, he spoke again, making me jump. "You know, they say if you get stranded out here during a storm, you should never, ever get out of your car." I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "Why not?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned to me, his eyes wide. "Because they'll get you," he whispered. "The things that lurk in the shadows. They'll drag you into the woods and you'll never be seen again." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I wanted to tell him to shut up, to stop scaring me. But something about the way he said it, the way his eyes bore into mine, made the words catch in my throat. Suddenly, a loud bang came from the back of the car, making me jump. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but all I saw was the endless black of the woods, the rain streaking down the glass. What was that? I cried, my voice shaking. He just laughed. Probably just a tree branch or something. Nothing to worry about. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The storm was getting worse, the wind howling like a pack of wolves. The car shuddered as a gust hit us. I glanced over at him, my stomach twisting with fear. He was staring straight ahead, his hands gripping the door handle. I could see the whites of his knuckles. Suddenly, he turned to me, his eyes wild. "Pull over," he said, his voice low and urgent. I shook my head, my heart pounding in my chest. No way. I'm not stopping in the middle of nowhere in this storm. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. I said, "Pull over," he shouted. I jerked my arm away, my fear turning to anger. "Get out of my car," I growled, my voice shaking. He stared at me for a moment, his eyes narrowing. Then, without warning, he lunged at me, his hands closing around my throat. I screamed, my foot slamming down on the brake. The car skidded to a stop, the tires squealing. I clawed at his hands, gasping for air. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the back of the car, followed by a deafening roar. I froze, my blood turning to ice in my veins. He froze too, his grip loosening. We both turned to look, our eyes wide with terror. A creature stood there, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It was massive, with sharp claws and teeth that gleamed in the dim light. It let out another earth-shattering roar, its breath hot on the back of my neck. We both screamed, scrambling to get out of the car. I threw the door open and ran, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear him running beside me, his footsteps pounding in the mud. We ran blindly through the woods, the branches whipping at our faces. The rain pounded down, soaking us to the bone. I could hear the creature crashing through the undergrowth behind us, its roars echoing through the trees. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs felt like they were going to give out. I could barely see through the rain and the fog, but I kept going, driven by pure terror. Finally, I stumbled upon a small cabin, its lights glowing in the darkness. I pounded on the door, my fists aching. A man opened it, his eyes wide with shock. "Please, help us," I cried, my voice hoarse. "There's a creature, it's after us." He stared at me for a moment, then nodded. "Come on, get inside," he said, ushering us in. We collapsed on the floor, gasping for air. The man slammed the door behind us, locking it tight. "What the hell is going on out there?" he asked, his voice shaking. I shook my head, my mind racing. "I don't know," I whispered. "But whatever it is, it's not human." We huddled together in the cabin, listening to the creature's roars echoing through the woods. The storm raged on, the wind howling like a pack of wolves. I don't know how long we sat there, our hearts pounding in our chests. But eventually, the roars faded, and the storm began to subside. We emerged from the cabin, our legs shaking. The woods were silent, the rain slowing to a drizzle. I turned to the man, my eyes searching his face. "What was that thing?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, his eyes haunted. "I don't know," he said. "But whatever it wasn't from around here." We made our way back to the car, our steps cautious. It was still there, the driver's side door hanging open. I peered inside, my stomach twisting with fear. The creature was gone, but something else caught my eye. A single, long hair, matted with blood, lay on the seat. I shuddered, my mind racing with questions. What was that thing? Where did it come from? And what happened to the man I had picked up? I may never know the answers. But one thing is for sure, I'll never forget the night I came face to face with the creature in the woods, and lived to tell the tale. It was dark as hell as I drove down that winding road through the thick forest. The trees loomed over me, their branches reaching out like creepy fingers. I'd been on the road for hours, just me and the steady hum of my truck engine. It was late, and I was beat, but I still had a ways to go. I glanced down at the fuel gauge, almost empty. Great, just what I needed. I'd driven this route a bunch of times before as a long-haul trucker, but tonight felt different somehow. The air felt heavy and quiet, except for the crunch of gravel under my tires. I always prided myself on being a cool customer, someone who could handle stress without freaking out. But tonight, I had this knot in my stomach that just wouldn't quit. As I turned a corner, I spotted a clearing up ahead. Looked like a good spot to pull over and rest for a bit. I shut off the engine and stepped out into the cool night air. The silence of the forest wrapped around me like a thick blanket. The fresh scent of pine and dirt filled my nose, but it didn't do much to calm my nerves. I stretched my legs, taking a deep breath, but something about the stillness just felt off. That's when I noticed a figure emerging from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. A tall, skinny guy with a friendly smile that seemed a little too wide. "Hey there," he called out, his voice echoing through the quiet. "You lost?" I hesitated, not sure how to respond. "Nah, just taking a break. Running low on gas." "Ah, you're in the wrong place for that," he said, stepping closer. "Name's Jasper. You're not from around here, are you?" I shook my head, trying to figure out what this guy was about. "Just passing through." Jasper's smile got even wider, but it gave me the creeps. "You should be careful. These woods play tricks on people. Strange stuff happens out here, especially at night." I raised an eyebrow, not buying it. "What kind of strange stuff?" He leaned in closer, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "People go missing. You hear whispers in the trees. Some say it's the creatures that live in the shadows, watching and waiting." I let out a nervous chuckle. "You're kidding, right?" "Nope," he said, dead serious. "There are stories about things that lurk in the dark. You might think it's just your imagination, but trust me, it's real. I've seen things." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Like what?" "Like figures moving between the trees, eyes watching you from the darkness. You might hear rustling, but when you look, there's nothing there. Just the trees, closing in on you." I forced a laugh, but it felt hollow. "I think I'll be fine. Just need to rest for a bit and then I'm out of here." Jasper's expression turned serious. "You should really find a place to stay the night. It's not safe to be out here alone." I felt that knot in my stomach tighten. "I'll be okay. I just need to rest for a bit." "Suit yourself," he said, backing away slowly. "Just remember, if you hear the whispers, don't listen. They want to lure you in." With that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me standing there alone. I shook my head, trying to shake off his warnings. The guy was just trying to scare me, that's all. I sat down on a fallen log, pulled out a granola bar, and tried to relax. But the longer I sat there, the more I felt like the forest was pressing in around me. The silence was deafening, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Suddenly, I heard a rustling sound coming from the trees behind me. My heart started racing as I turned to look, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness, thick and black. I stood up, brushing off my jeans, telling myself it was just an animal or the wind. But the rustling kept going, and I felt my pulse quicken. I decided it was time to get back on the road. The last thing I needed was to be stuck out here all night. I climbed back into my truck and started the engine, the familiar roar filling the silence. As I pulled away from the clearing, I couldn't help but feel like I was leaving something behind, something important. The road twisted and turned, the trees closing in around me again. I drove slow, my eyes scanning the shadows for any movement. That rustling sound kept echoing in my mind, and I felt paranoia creeping in. Was Jasper right? Were there really creatures lurking in the dark? I shook my head, trying to push the thoughts away. I was a rational guy, not one to believe in ghost stories or urban legends. But the deeper I drove into the woods, the more the atmosphere changed. The air got colder, and the darkness thickened, wrapping around my truck like a heavy blanket. Then, just as I was starting to relax, I heard it again, a rustling sound, closer this time. My heart raced as I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but there was nothing there. Just the road behind me, swallowed up by shadows. I pressed the gas, wanting to put as much distance between me and whatever was out there. But the rustling kept going, and now I could hear faint whispers drifting through the trees. I rolled down the window, straining to hear, but it was just a jumble of weird sounds. "Get it together, Caden," I muttered to myself. "It's just the wind." But even as I said it, I felt the weight of the forest pressing down on me, the trees closing in like a cage. I turned on the radio, hoping the music would drown out the whispers, but the static just added to my anxiety. I needed to get out of here. Just then, the truck sputtered. I glanced down at the fuel gauge, empty. Panic surged through me. I hadn't seen a gas station for miles, and now I was stranded in the middle of nowhere. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart racing as I tried to figure out what to do next. I stepped out of the truck, the cool air hitting me like a slap in the face. I had to find help. Maybe I could flag down another driver or find a cabin or something. I looked around, the trees looming over me, their branches swaying in the wind. The whispers got louder, clearer now, and I could have sworn I heard my name. "Caden." I froze, my blood turning to ice. I turned slowly, scanning the darkness for the source of the voice. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Anyone there?" Silence answered me, thick and suffocating. I took a step back toward the truck, feeling panic rising in my chest. I had to get out of here. I turned to climb back into the cab when I heard it again, a rustling, followed by the sound of footsteps. My heart pounded as I peered into the shadows, trying to see what was coming. And then I saw them, figures emerging from the trees, their movements all jerky and unnatural. I held my breath, realizing they weren't just shadows, they were people, or at least they used to be. I stumbled back, my mind racing. Jasper's warnings echoed in my head. "They want to lure you in." These were the creatures he'd been talking about, the ones responsible for the disappearances. I turned and ran, adrenaline surging through me. The whispers followed, getting louder and more insistent. "Caden, come play with us." I could feel their eyes on me as I darted back toward my truck, their gaze burning into me. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled with the door handle, desperate to get away. I finally yanked it open and jumped inside, slamming the door behind me. I scrambled for the keys, my hands shaking as I jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the gear into drive, my foot mashing the gas pedal to the floor. I tore down the road, the trees blurring past in a rush of darkness. But the whispers didn't stop. They clung to me, wrapping around my mind. I could still feel their eyes, the weight of the forest pressing in. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those figures chasing after me, but there was nothing, just the road stretching behind me, swallowed up by shadows. I drove until the trees started to thin, the oppressive darkness lifting a little. The moonlight broke through the canopy, lighting up the road ahead. I could finally breathe again, my heart slowing as I put more and more distance between me and those woods. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd only escaped by the skin of my teeth. The whispers still echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of what I'd seen. I'd always thought of myself as a rational guy, someone who didn't believe in the supernatural. But now, I understood the power of local legends, the truth behind the stories passed down for generations. I'd learned to respect the wilderness, to see the danger lurking in the shadows. Those woods were alive, holding secrets that weren't meant to be uncovered. I'd faced my fears and stared down the unknown, and though I'd made it out, I knew those whispers would stay with me forever. A reminder of the darkness that lies just beyond the light. As I drove into the dawn, the first rays of sun breaking over the horizon, a sense of relief washed over me. I was alive, I'd made it through. But I also knew that those whispers in the woods would never really leave me. They'd always be there, a part of me now. It was the summer of 1995, and my friends and I were on a road trip that felt like it would never end. Just a bunch of thrill seekers looking for adventure, we piled into my old beat-up car with a map full of random spots and a playlist of our favorite songs blasting through the speakers. The sun was high, and the open road stretched ahead, promising excitement. As we drove down a long, winding highway, I spotted something off to the side, a rest stop that looked like it had been forgotten by time. The trees seemed to hunch closer, their branches twisting like gnarled fingers reaching out to snag anyone who dared to venture closer. As we neared the rest stop, the sky seemed to darken slightly, and the air grew colder, making our breath visible in the still heat. It was as if nature itself was warning us to turn back. Weeds choked the cracked pavement, and old, faded signs hung crookedly from rusted poles. The buildings were dilapidated, with broken windows and peeling paint that looked like rotting flesh. It was the kind of place that sent a shiver down your spine, and I felt a thrill of excitement surge through me. "Hey, guys! Let's check this out!" I shouted, my heart racing. Kala, my skeptical friend, rolled her eyes. "Zane, are you serious? That place looks creepy as hell. We should just keep driving." "Ah, come on. Where's your sense of adventure?" I shot back, grinning. This could be fun. Jake and Mia were already getting out of the car, and Kala hesitated for a moment before following. I could see the curiosity in her eyes, even if she tried to play it cool. But inside, I knew she was just as intrigued as I was. As we stepped out, the silence was eerie, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant sound of cars on the highway. The smell of damp earth and decaying wood filled my nostrils, and I couldn't help but feel a tingle of excitement mixed with dread. This was what I lived for, exploring the unknown. We wandered around the rest stop, kicking at the weeds and checking out the old buildings. The picnic tables were covered in grime, and trash littered the ground. I could almost hear the stories these walls could tell. I felt like a kid on a treasure hunt, ready to uncover some hidden mystery. Then, I spotted something that made my heart race even faster, a dusty old truck parked off to the side. It looked like it hadn't moved in years, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. "Hey, check this out!" I called to my friends, jogging over to the truck. "Zane, wait! Don't touch it!" Kala shouted, her voice tinged with worry. But I was already at the truck, running my fingers along the hood. It was cold and rough, covered in a thick layer of dust. I peered inside, and the sight made my heart race even faster. Old newspapers were strewn haphazardly, their yellowed edges curling up like the pages of a forgotten book. The faint, musty smell of rotting fabric and mold filled my nostrils as I peered into the gloom, my flashlight barely penetrating the thick darkness. Shadows danced in the corner of my vision, playing tricks on my mind as if the darkness itself were alive. "Dude, this is awesome," I said, grinning at Jake and Mia. "Can you believe this thing?" "Yeah, awesome if you want to get tetanus," Kala muttered, still standing a few steps back. "Let's just go." But I wasn't ready to leave yet. I felt a thrill of fear and excitement battling inside me. I wanted to impress my friends, to show them I was brave enough to explore this creepy place. Inside, my heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had to be brave. What if Kala was right? What if this was more than just an old truck? My thoughts raced, the fear of the unknown clashing with my desire to look fearless in front of my friends. I could see Kala's apprehension growing, her eyes darting nervously, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in way over our heads. "Come on, it's just a truck," I said, trying to sound casual. "What's the worst that could happen?" As I reached for the door handle, I heard a strange noise, a low creak that sent chills down my spine. I hesitated for a moment, glancing back at Kala, who looked like she was about to freak out. "Zane, seriously. Let's go," she urged, her voice shaky. But I couldn't back down now. I pulled the door open, and that's when everything changed. The door creaked loudly, and I was hit with a wave of musty air. Inside, the truck was dark, and I could barely see anything. I leaned in closer, squinting to get a better look. And then I saw it. In the dim light, something shifted in the back seat. My heart dropped as I caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure. It was just a flash, but it was enough to send my adrenaline skyrocketing. What the hell was that? I gasped, stumbling back. "Zane, get away from there!" Kala screamed, her eyes wide with fear. But it was too late. The shadow seemed to move again, and I felt a cold breeze rush past me. Panic surged through my body, and I turned to run, but something made me stop. The whispers started, soft at first, like the wind rustling through the trees, but they quickly grew louder, echoing in my ears. "Zane, come play with us." I froze, my blood running cold. I glanced back at the truck, and that's when I saw the figures emerging from the shadows. They looked like people, but their faces were twisted and dark, their eyes hollow and empty. I couldn't breathe. "Run!" I shouted, my voice breaking as I turned and bolted back toward the car. I could hear Kala and the others screaming behind me, their footsteps pounding on the ground as we all raced away from that nightmare of a rest stop. The whispers followed us, growing louder and more insistent. "Zane, come play with us." I didn't look back. I just ran, my legs pumping as fast as they could go. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches reaching out like claws, trying to grab us as we fled. I could feel the shadows creeping closer, their presence suffocating. We reached the car, and I fumbled with the door handle, my hand shaking. I finally managed to yank it open and jumped inside, slamming the door shut behind me. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine roared to life. "Go! Go!" Kala shouted, her voice filled with panic. I slammed the gear into drive and hit the gas, tearing away from that nightmare of a rest stop. The trees blurred past in a rush of darkness, and I could still hear the whispers fading into the distance. As we drove away, my heart raced, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. But the thrill was gone, replaced by a heavy sense of dread. What had just happened? What did we see back there? Did you see that? I panted, glancing at Jake and Mia in the back seat. They looked just as shaken as I felt. Yeah, man. What the hell was that? Jake replied, his voice shaky. I don't know, I admitted, my bravado slipping away. But we shouldn't have gone there. That place is wrong. Calla was silent, staring out the window, her expression a mix of fear and disbelief. I could tell she was processing everything that had just happened. I felt a pang of guilt. I had pushed us to explore, and now we were all rattled. As we drove further away, the rest stop faded into the distance, but the memory of it lingered in my mind. The whispers, the shadows, the feeling of being watched, it all felt too real. I couldn't shake the image of those twisted faces from my thoughts. Zane, do you think we'll ever go back? Mia asked quietly. No way, I replied, shaking my head. Some places are better left alone. The rest of the drive was quiet. Each of us lost in our thoughts, replaying the events of the night in our heads. I realized that my desire for adventure had led us into something dark and terrifying. I had wanted to impress my friends, to show them I was brave, but now I just felt foolish. I had learned a hard lesson about the difference between courage and recklessness, and it had shaken me to my core. As we finally pulled into a gas station, the bright lights felt like a relief. I parked the car and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the lingering fear. We got out, stretching our legs and trying to shake off the adrenaline. Let's just get back on the road and forget about that place, Calla said, her voice steadier now. Yeah, agreed, I said, forcing a smile. No more creepy rest stops for us. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't forget what happened at Timber Road. I had learned a valuable lesson that night. There are some places that hold secrets best left undisturbed. And sometimes, it's better to listen to that little voice in your head telling you to turn back. As we drove away from that gas station, I felt a newfound respect for the unknown. I might be a thrill seeker, but I realized that not all adventures are worth taking. Some things are better left in the dark, where they belong. The experience had changed us, made us more cautious, more aware of the dangers that lurk in the shadows. We would never be the same after that night, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. I was beat, man. Driving all day and night really takes it out of you. I pulled into this old truck stop on a lonely highway, the neon sign flickering like it was about to die any second. The place looked like it had seen better days, for sure. I parked my truck and went inside, desperate for some coffee and a chance to stretch my legs. The place was mostly empty, except for a couple of truckers in the corner, drinking their coffee. The waitress, a tired-looking woman with too much makeup, came over and poured me a cup without saying a word. I took a sip, making a face at the bitter taste. Not Starbucks, that's for sure. I looked around, seeing the peeling floors and old photos on the walls. It was like going back in time, to a place that time forgot. The flickering lights made the whole place feel creepy. Just as I was about to head back out, I heard some guys talking at the counter. They were two rough-looking dudes, whispering to each other. Did you hear about the latest disappearance? One of them said, his voice low. The other guy nodded, looking around nervously. Yeah, they say it happened right here, at this truck stop. I felt a chill go down my spine. Disappearances? At this place? I couldn't help but listen in, my curiosity getting the better of me. They say the guy was just passing through, like we all are, the first guy went on. He stopped for coffee and a sandwich, and then poof, he was gone. No trace of him. The other guy shivered. It's not the first time, either. They say this place is cursed, haunted by the ghosts of those who never made it out. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. Was this place really haunted, or were these guys just telling tall tales? I decided to go back outside, get some fresh air and clear my head. But as I stepped out, I noticed something weird. The staff, who were inside just a minute ago, were huddled together, whispering and looking at me. A knot formed in my stomach. Something wasn't right here. I turned to go back to my truck, but a raspy voice stopped me. "Leaving so soon?" an old man asked. I turned to see a weathered-looking guy with shaky hands holding a coffee cup. His eyes were sharp, and his grin was unsettling. Yeah, I was just gonna head out," I said, feeling uneasy. The old man chuckled, his laugh low and rough. "Don't be in a hurry, son. This place has a way of keeping you here, whether you like it or not." I frowned, not sure what to say. The old man leaned in closer, his breath stale. "You know, they say this place is cursed," he whispered. "That the ghosts of those who died here are still around, looking for their next victim." A chill went down my spine. His words matched what I'd heard inside, and suddenly, I didn't want to stay here anymore. "I think I'm just gonna go," I said, trying to sound calm. The old man laughed, his eyes gleaming. "Oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Once you're here, you're never really free." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. I turned to go, but the old man spoke up again. "You know, they say the staff are in on it," he said, his voice low. "That they lure people in, and then they disappear." My stomach twisted. This couldn't be real, it had to be a sick joke. But the old man looked serious, and I was on high alert. I looked back at the truck stop, my mind racing. I had to get out of here, put as much distance between me and this place as possible. But when I got to my truck, I noticed the tires were flat, the air hissing out. Panic hit me. I was trapped. I turned back to the truck stop, seeing the staff watching me closely, their eyes narrowed. I took a deep breath and went back inside, my legs feeling heavy. The waitress came over, her face blank. "Need anything else?" she asked, her voice fake sweet. "No, I'm good," I replied, trying to sound normal. She nodded and went to the kitchen. As she did, I noticed a door in the back, half hidden by a curtain. It was open a crack, and I could see a dim light inside. I glanced around, making sure no one was watching. Then I peeked through the curtain. What I saw made my blood run cold. The room was small and bare, with concrete walls and a flickering light bulb. In the corner was a pile of stuff, suitcases, wallets, keys, all jumbled together. And on top, a torn photo. I felt sick as I recognized the guy in the photo, one of the men who'd talked about the disappearances. Next to him was a woman and kid, smiling. I turned to leave, my mind racing. I had to get out of here, call the cops and tell them what I'd seen. But as I turned, I came face to face with the old man again, a twisted grin on his face. "I told you, you're never really free once you're here," he whispered, his voice dripping with evil. I tried to run, but the staff were closing in, their eyes hungry. I was trapped, with nowhere to go. I fought back, adrenaline pumping. I shoved past the old man and sprinted for the front door, but the waitress blocked my way, her face cold. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, smirking. I tried to get around her, but she grabbed my arm, her grip like iron. I yanked free and stumbled back, my heart pounding. "Help! Somebody help!" I shouted, but my voice echoed in the empty diner. I looked for an exit, but the other customers were staring at me, their eyes wide. They were all in on it, I realized, waiting for me to mess up. I saw the door to the back room again and ran for it. I pushed through the curtain and slammed the door, my heart racing. I was in the dim room again, surrounded by the forgotten stuff. I had to find a way out. I scanned the room, looking for a window or another door. But there was nothing. Just the flickering light and the pile of lost lives. Suddenly, I heard voices outside. They were coming. I had to think fast. I noticed a small window near the ceiling, barely big enough to fit through. I jumped up, grabbing the edge and pulling myself up. Just as I was about to make it, the door burst open. The old man stood there, the staff behind him. Their eyes were wild, hungry. "Get him," the old man yelled, and I panicked. I pushed through the window, tumbling to the ground outside. I landed hard, pain shooting through me, but I didn't stop. I scrambled up and ran into the woods behind the truck stop, branches whipping my face. I could hear them shouting behind me, their footsteps pounding. I ran as fast as I could, the adrenaline pushing me. The trees closed in, the darkness wrapping around me. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stop. I had to get away. I could hear them getting closer, their laughter chilling me. Suddenly, I tripped, falling hard. I could hear them now, just behind me. I had to find a way out. Then I saw it, a cliff ahead, the ground dropping away into blackness. I hesitated for a second, my heart pounding. But there was no choice. I had to jump. I ran for the edge and leaped, feeling weightless for a moment. Then I hit the water with a splash, the cold seeping into my bones. I fought to stay afloat, my body aching. I could hear them yelling above me. They didn't care if I lived or died, just wanted to keep their secrets. The current was strong, pulling me under. I kicked hard, my strength fading. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd never have again. Then I saw the moonlight on the water. I pushed myself up, gasping for air. I swam with everything I had, the water dragging at me. I didn't know if I'd make it, but I had to try. Had to escape. Finally, I reached the shore, collapsing on the ground, coughing. I looked back at the water, half expecting them to come after me. But the darkness hid everything. I lay there for a minute, listening to the night sounds. I was free. I'd escaped that nightmare, but I knew I'd never forget it. As I walked away, I felt determined. I'd warn others, tell them about the horrors of that truck stop. Make sure no one else fell victim to its dark past. With that thought, I left the last stop behind, the flickering lights fading into the distance. The figure in the mirror. It was one of those super dark nights where the moon was hiding behind all the trees. I was driving home alone after a really long day at work. The road twisted and turned through the thick forest, and the trees felt like they were closing in on my car. It was pitch black, with only my headlights to see by. The quiet was almost eerie, no other cars, no people, just the sound of my tires on the pavement. I hate driving alone at night. It always makes me feel a little jumpy. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, expecting to see something back there. But nope, just the empty road stretching out behind me. I tried to tell myself I was being silly, that it was all in my head. Then, as I turned a sharp corner, I caught a glimpse of something in the mirror. My heart jumped in my chest. There was a figure, just a dark shape really, but it felt like it was getting closer to my car. I squinted my eyes, trying to see better, but the darkness swallowed everything up. I told myself it was probably just a tree or a big rock or something. but I still felt a shiver go down my spine. "Get it together, Mira," I muttered to myself. "It's just the road, that's all." But that figure kept showing up in my mirror, always just out of sight. Every time I glanced back, it seemed to be a little nearer. I could feel my palms getting sweaty on the steering wheel. This road was so empty and isolated, and the thought of being out here alone made my stomach feel all twisted up. I tried turning up the music, hoping it would take my mind off things. But the quiet of the forest made the music sound muffled and far away. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. It's fine," I kept saying to myself. "It's probably just another car." But as I kept driving, that figure wouldn't go away. I could see it moving in and out of the shadows, always right behind me. My heart started pounding, and I felt a strong urge to speed up, to get away from whatever it was. But part of me was also really curious. What was it? Who was it? I turned another corner, and the road got even narrower. The trees leaned in closer, and the darkness felt thick and heavy. I glanced in the mirror again, and there it was. The figure was clearer now, a tall shape that seemed to appear out of nowhere in the blackness. It looked like something out of a scary movie, and I felt panic start to build up inside me. Oh, this is bad," I whispered to myself. My heart was pounding as I tried to figure out what to do. Should I stop? Should I keep going? My gut was telling me to get out of there as fast as I could, but I was also really curious to know what was going on. I decided to keep driving, hoping the figure would just disappear. But it didn't. It stayed right behind me, matching my speed, hiding in the shadows. Every time I looked back, it seemed to be getting closer. I could feel fear creeping up on me, squeezing my chest tighter and tighter. Then, all of a sudden, I hit a huge pothole in the road. My car bounced, and I swerved a little. That's when I made up my mind. I had to see what this figure was, once and for all. I couldn't let fear control me. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart racing. The car lights lit up the area, making long shadows dance in the darkness. "Okay, let's figure this out," I said, trying to sound brave. I took a deep breath and opened up the car door. The cool night air hit me as I stepped out. It was so quiet, the darkness felt almost heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I stood there for a minute, looking at the shadows all around me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking a little. "Is someone there?" Nothing. Just the sound of leaves rustling and the wind in the trees. I felt scared, but also determined to know what was happening. I took a few careful steps toward the road, looking all around me. That's when I saw it again. It was closer now. The figure stepped out from behind a tree, and I could see it clearly. It was a man, tall and skinny, with messy hair and clothes that looked old and worn. My heart raced as I tried to see his face in the dark, but it was too hard to make out. "Hey! Are you okay?" I yelled, trying to sound calm and friendly. "Do you need some help?" He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, looking at me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I had to fight the urge to just run back to my car. "Please say something," I said, my voice shaking a little. Finally, he took a step forward. "I'm lost," he said, barely above a whisper. "I've been wandering around in these woods for hours." I felt a little relieved, but also still really uneasy. "You shouldn't be out here alone," I said, keeping my distance. "It's not safe at all." "I know," he replied, his eyes darting around nervously. I was trying to find the road, but I got turned around somewhere. I looked back at my car, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to help him, but part of me just wanted to jump back in my car and get out of there. Do you have a phone? I asked, hoping there might be an easy solution. Maybe I can call someone for you. He shook his head. No, I lost it earlier. I just need to find my car. Where's your car? I asked, trying to keep the conversation going, but I could feel the tension in the air. Not far from here, he said, glancing back at the trees. I think it's just down that path. I felt a knot in my stomach. I don't know if I should go with you, I said carefully. Maybe we should just wait for another car to come by. He stepped closer, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. Please, I really need help. I promise I won't hurt you or anything. But something about the way he said it made me feel uneasy again. The fear was creeping back in, wrapping around me like a cold blanket. I really think I should go, I said, slowly backing away toward my car. Wait, he yelled, his voice getting louder and more upset. You can't just leave me here. I turned around and ran back to my car. My heart was pounding in my chest. I jumped in and locked the doors, my hands shaking as I put the key in the ignition. The car roared to life, and I shifted into drive, pressing down hard on the gas pedal. I sped down the road, the trees rushing past me in a blur of darkness. But the figure didn't go away. He was still standing there, watching me leave. I could still hear his voice in my head, like a creepy song. Mira, come play with us. I drove until I finally reached the end of the trees. The darkness lifted a little as the moonlight broke through. I could finally breathe normally again, my heart slowing down as I got farther and farther from the woods. But I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. That creepy figure, the way he seemed to appear out of nowhere in the dark. I'd always thought of myself as a logical person who didn't believe in spooky stories and stuff. But now, I totally understood why people tell those kinds of tales. The woods have secrets that are better left alone. I learned to be more careful and to trust my instincts. The wilderness can be dangerous, with shadows that hold mysteries you really don't want to uncover. I faced my fears that night, and even though I got away, I know I'll never forget it. Those whispers in the woods will always be with me, a reminder of the darkness that's out there, just beyond the light. The fog rolled in thick and heavy, wrapping around the coastal road like a shroud. I could barely see a few feet ahead of me as I drove, my little car struggling against the chill that seeped through the windows. It was the summer of 1975, and I was on my way to a summer job at a beach resort. I was excited about the adventure ahead, but the fog made everything feel eerie, like I was driving through a dream or a nightmare. Growing up in a small town, I had always yearned for something more than the predictable routine of school and work. I was a college student, and this summer job represented freedom and independence. I imagined long days on the beach, meeting new people, and maybe even finding a little romance. But today, the beauty of the coast felt overshadowed by an unsettling quiet. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. I was making good time, but I knew I needed to be careful. The cliffs below were steep, and one wrong turn could send me tumbling into the depths. As I rounded a bend, I spotted a figure standing by the side of the road, thumb outstretched. A hitchhiker. I hesitated for a moment, my instincts kicking in. My mother had always warned me about picking up strangers, but something about him caught my eye. He looked harmless enough, tall, with dark hair that fell over his forehead and a smile that seemed genuine. I pulled over, heart racing. Need a ride? I asked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Thanks, he replied, sliding into the passenger seat. I'm Dorian. Isla, I said, forcing a smile. I tried to ignore the flutter of unease in my stomach. Dorian had a way of looking at me that felt both charming and unsettling, like he was sizing me up. As we drove, Dorian filled the silence with stories. He talked about his travels, the places he'd seen, and the people he'd met. I found myself captivated by his words. There was a certain magnetism about him, a way of speaking that made even the most mundane details seem fascinating. Yet, beneath his charm, I sensed something dark lurking. "Have you heard about the ghosts that haunt these cliffs?" he asked, his eyes glinting with mischief. I chuckled nervously. "Ghosts? You're kidding, right?" "No, really," he insisted, leaning closer. "People say they've seen apparitions wandering the cliffs, lost souls looking for something, or someone. There's a legend about a shipwreck that happened decades ago. They say the spirits of those who died still roam these shores." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "That's unsettling, isn't it?" He flashed that charming smile again, but there was something in his gaze that made me uneasy. "People have reported seeing figures in the fog, just standing there, watching." I glanced out the window, half expecting to see a ghostly figure lurking in the mist. Instead, I saw nothing but the swirling gray. I forced myself to laugh it off. "You're just trying to scare me." "Maybe," he said, his voice low. "But you should always be careful. The cliffs can be dangerous, especially in this fog." The conversation shifted back to lighter topics, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Dorian was hiding something. There was an intensity in his demeanor, a darkness that lurked beneath his charming exterior. I found myself torn between attraction and caution, drawn to him while also feeling a nagging sense of unease. As we continued down the winding road, the fog thickened, wrapping around the car like a living thing. I could barely see the edge of the cliff, and my heart raced with every turn. Dorian seemed unfazed, his eyes scanning the fog as if searching for something. "Do you ever feel like you're being watched?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "Not really," I replied, though I could feel a shiver run down my spine. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged, but there was a glint in his eye that sent a jolt of fear through me. "Just a feeling I get sometimes. Especially here." Just then, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, something pale and fleeting, disappearing into the fog. My heart raced as I turned to look, but there was nothing there. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Dorian leaned forward, peering into the mist. "What did you see?" "I don't know," I admitted, my hands gripping the steering wheel. "It was just a figure, I think." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're not imagining things, Isla. The cliffs are full of secrets." I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that was creeping in. "Okay, but let's not dwell on ghosts. I'm just trying to get to my job." "Of course," he said, but I could tell he was enjoying my discomfort. The tension in the car was palpable, and I felt trapped between my attraction to him and my instinct to get away. Suddenly, the car jolted as I hit a pothole, and I swerved slightly. "Whoa!" Dorian exclaimed, grabbing the dashboard. "Careful." "Sorry." "It's hard to see with all this fog," I said, my heart racing. I took a deep breath and tried to focus on the road ahead. But the fog thickened even more, swirling around us like a living entity. I could barely make out the edge of the cliff, and panic began to set in. "I don't like this," I whispered. "Just keep driving," Dorian said, his tone oddly calm. "You're doing great." But I wasn't sure I believed him. The atmosphere in the car had shifted, and I could feel a weight pressing down on me. I glanced at Dorian, and for a moment, I saw something else in his eyes, a darkness that sent chills through me. "Dorian, are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned to me, and his smile was gone. "You shouldn't have picked me up, Isla." My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" Suddenly, the fog parted for just a moment, revealing a ghostly figure standing at the edge of the cliff. I gasped, my foot slamming on the brake. The car skidded to a halt, and I stared in horror at the apparition. "Do you see it?" I gasped, my voice barely above a whisper. Dorian leaned closer, his expression unreadable. "Yes, I do." I could feel the panic rising in my chest as I realized that the figure was staring right at us, its eyes hollow and empty. "What is happening?" I cried, my voice trembling. Dorian's smile returned, but it was twisted, sinister. "You're about to find out." In that moment, everything clicked into place. The stories, the way he spoke about the cliffs, the darkness in his eyes, it all made sense. Dorian wasn't just a hitchhiker, he was something far more sinister. A malevolent spirit, perhaps, drawn to the cliffs and the souls that wandered too close. "Get out of the car!" I screamed, my instincts kicking in. I yanked on the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Isla," Dorian said, his voice low and smooth, "you can't leave. You're part of this now." I felt a surge of adrenaline as I realized I had to escape. I kicked the door with all my strength, and finally, it swung open. I didn't look back as I stumbled out, the fog swirling around me like a living entity. "Isla!" Dorian called, but I didn't stop. I ran toward the edge of the cliff, the sound of crashing waves below urging me forward. The figure was gone, but I could feel Dorian's presence behind me, dark and menacing. Just as I reached the edge, I turned to face him. "Stay away from me!" I shouted, my heart pounding in my chest. But Dorian was closer than I thought. He lunged for me, and I dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding his grasp. In that moment, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, and I realized I was teetering on the edge of the cliff. "Isla!" he shouted, desperation in his voice. I stumbled backward, the world spinning around me. I closed my eyes, willing myself to stay calm. I had to get away. I took a deep breath and turned to run, but the fog was thick, disorienting me. Suddenly, I heard the sound of metal grinding against stone. I looked back just in time to see the car begin to slide toward the edge of the cliff, Dorian's figure silhouetted against the fog. "Isla!" he called again, but I didn't hesitate. I sprinted away from the edge, my heart racing as I heard the sound of the car crashing into the waves below. I fell to my knees, breathless and shaken. The fog began to lift, revealing the rocky cliffs and the ocean stretching out before me. I was alive, but the weight of what had just happened hung heavy in the air. As I sat there, the reality of my narrow escape began to sink in. I had faced something dark and dangerous, something that had almost taken me. But I had survived. I had trusted my instincts, and that had made all the difference. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. I took one last look at the spot where Dorian had been, but he was gone, swallowed by the fog. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I knew I had to keep moving. I had a job to get to, a life waiting for me beyond the cliffs. As I walked away from the edge, I realized I was no longer the same person I had been when I started this journey. I had faced my fears, confronted the unknown, and emerged stronger. The cliffs of despair had almost claimed me, but I had chosen to fight back. And in that moment, I knew I would never forget the lessons I had learned on that foggy coastal road.